All right, we are recording. It's actually a second take. I don't know why. I'm just going. Like my energy is a little weird. So how my brain is like picking a point to go off on a rant or ramble on is just a little weird. I want to see if I can get a bit more focused here. So continuing Utopia. This one is of their slaves and of their marriages. Except there's only like 2 pages. The rest of it is about various other topics. So start off with their slaves. They do not make slaves or prisoners of war, except those that are taken in battle, nor the sons of their slaves. So that first part, and there is more to this. That first part is saying they're not POWs, except for those taken in battle. So that if you're captured on the battlefield, you can be made a slave. But if you're a non-combatant, then they will not take you as slave. So that would be like if you were caught somewhere else, or if they were to capture an entire town, and the various non-combatants in the town remain non-combatants, like, okay, they cannot be slaves. Makes some sense. Nor the sons of their slaves. That's one that I'm not sure exactly how that would work, because if you're talking specifically about the POWs at this point, that's all we've gotten to thus far, that's going to be predominantly men. Where are these sons coming from? Well, they do have more slaves than this, nor those of other nations. Okay, so in theory, they not make slaves of those of other nations, so in theory, they're not taking them from, they're not like, just capturing people and making them into slaves. The slaves among them are only such as are condemned to that state of life for the commission of some crime, or, which is more common, such as their merchants find condemned to die in those parts to which they trade, whom they sometimes redeem at low rates, and other places have them for nothing. So what that's saying is that the bulk of their slaves are actually convicted criminals, so they would be utopians, or those that they, as the merchants are out there, might see a slave and be like, yeah, I'll buy him. So that could explain how they can be sons of slaves, but it's never elaborated as to the status of that son of the slave, aside from it not being a slave. Okay, I get where does it belong to? Does it count as a citizen of Utopia, or would they have to be sent out to whatever their home nation should be? Which is very possible as far as, like, yeah, let's just say that they bought some slaves, they end up having kids. Would they return the children then to the nation that the slaves were originally from? Because you might be able to say, well, that makes more sense that they belong there than they belong in Utopia. But if they stay in Utopia, then in theory they're staying with their parents. I mean, I don't know. It's not explained. And there are more slaves in this, but we'll get to that. Slaves are kept at perpetual labor and are always chained. Okay. But then we also have, there's another sort of slaves, are the poor of the neighboring countries, who offer of their own accord to come and serve them. They treat them better and use them in all other respects, as well as their own countrymen, except they are imposing more labor upon them. So basically, you can decide to emigrate there and become a slave, which it is true. There is no explanation, thus far at least, for how one could immigrate to Utopia to become a citizen. What was Raphael? The guy who visited Utopia and was with them for 5 years. What stats did he have? Because he lived there for a time. Would he have been a slave? I don't know. I don't recall that ever being explained. Because if you, I guess this is these slaves are people who emigrate there, but specifically to work but that means that they work as slaves. But was Raphael working as a slave? Because if he wasn't, then that means that there's another status where, in theory, he still had to work to earn his keep. Why would they not enter into that? I mean, it might just be I don't know what Raphael's status was. Maybe he was a slave. I actually need to add this in here. Lived there for 5 years, but his status is not given. If he was not a slave, what state did he exist in, and why do these people not enjoy the same status? So it's also, they are treated better than other slaves and are, I guess, assigned work, you could say, like citizens, but they are expected to do more work than the citizens. Which... See, I'm also just thinking, somebody also has to direct the slaves and such. I mean, it's still a slave state, but it is just... How does this not potentially discourage the Utopians to actually work, since they can just make these slaves do that work? But anyway, does also say that they are free to go back, which indeed falls out, but seldom, meaning that they really want to. But they are not forced to stay. But it also does say, and it's not explained, so they do not send them away empty-handed. That's not explained what that actually means. Like what kind of pay is given to them. But it still is I guess you can just I've mentioned previously, ancient slavery is different from modern slavery in that what people teach are typically taught for what modern slavery is, that would also be known as chattel slavery, and it is very different than what you had for ancient slavery. Ancient slavery can be more like what was there described, where it would be kind of just a type of employment. Not necessarily a good type. Well, it gets weird because you got like the feudal system with indentured servants, which is kind of like this. But yeah, you might be a slave, but it is you're basically committed for a certain amount of time to work there. You're performing this work, and your compensation for it, you might not necessarily be paid, although you might be. But you'd be kept. Like, you'd have a home there, you would be fed, you would be clothed. So it is basically, you are attached to the land there that is owned by somebody else, and so you work for their benefit, not for yours. Your benefit is the room and board, essentially. But it is also true that sometimes you could get paid, because even in chattel slavery, I got over there, I read it a year ago, maybe now? Collection of Works by Frederick Douglass. And he does mention that he could be hired out by his master when he was still a slave. And he would get paid. And he would, I'm pretty sure did say he then turned over some of it to his master. Not necessarily all of it, though. He would keep what he would get to keep would be a very small amount of it. But I'm pretty sure it did say he was allowed to keep some of it. I don't recall any explanation, though, of what he did with what he got to keep. Yeah, and then just almost as a non sequitur, we get to what they do about their sick, the permanently infirm, and how basically they get to commit suicide if they want, which I'm very much against. I do consider that, especially with how it's described here, this is very much something rife for abuse, because it's not just you are in pain, quote unquote pain, because I mean, we got in another one of the chapters that their whole mentality is based around pleasure. So they see it as, oh, well, you're not experiencing any pleasure anymore in your life, so go ahead and end it. But it's a little bit more involved than that, because you must get permission from a priest and a magistrate, or the Senate. I think it does bounce a little bit between if it is the full Senate or just the magistrates. But it still is you have to get permission. Sounds a little silly, but Nah, I mean, yeah. Anyway, I mean, you also do see that with like Made in Canada, where you need to get permission. It needs to be the government signing off on it, but there've also been stories where it's like, yeah, there should be so many regulations that don't allow you to just have that happen very, very rapidly. No indication of timeline here, but anyhow. Those that have lived out, those who have really outlived themselves. There we go. They should no longer nourish such a rooted distemper, but choose rather to die, since they cannot live, but in much misery, being assured that if they thus deliver themselves from torture, or willing that others should do it, they shall be happy after death, since, by acting thus, they lose none of their pleasure, but only the troubles of life. So as I said, they measured things. To them, the ultimate virtue, the ultimate thing to achieve, the ultimate goal of virtue is pleasure. So to them, because permanent infirmity, whatever that might be caused by, would cause them unhappiness, well, then obviously it's, a lack of pleasure, then obviously you should just end it. It's like, that's not really good. It's like, you should have value for life, but this is Utopia. It's a slave state. They don't value life. They have the option of starving themselves of their own accord, or taking opium, and by that means die without pain. But no man is forced on this way of ending his life. Oh, that sounds nice. And if they cannot be persuaded to it, so they can be persuaded to it. There's many kinds of persuasion. Yeah, sure, we're not forcing them, we're just convincing them. That's so different. This does not induce them to fail in their attendance and care of them. Meaning that if somebody's like, but I don't want to die, then okay, we'll keep taking care of you, but want to bet they keep trying to persuade you? No value of life. Anyway. But we also have this, which I just... If any man takes away his own life, without the approbation, so the approval, of the priests and the Senate, they give him none of the honors of a decent funeral, but throw his body into a ditch. This is stupid. It really is. Because that's a punishment on the family. That's not a punishment on the person. They're dead. They don't care. It's a punishment on the family. Because, and this is... It's not just that, you don't get any of the honors of a decent funeral. No, we're giving you something dishonorable by throwing you into a ditch. Like animal carcasses, you would potentially do the same to. That is a punishment to the family. That is a dishonor to them. Because the person is dead, okay? And if they are at the point of deciding that they want to end their own life and do so without approval, because that's what matters in this situation, that if they want to do that, why are they going to care about how their body is treated afterwards? Okay, it's like, seriously, who would think that is a good idea? Only somebody who cannot think past the first order of the decision. Like, they can only think this far. They can't go to that far. They can't go to that next leap. It's only here. All right, I'm going to pause, but then we're finally going to get to marriage. Okay, there's a lot on this page. And this is only page 2. But yeah, I got to pause and just get a drink of water. All right, there's actually a fair amount that's in this first highlight here, because it's all basically one sentence. Their women are not married before 18. That actually makes some sense. Nor their men before 2 and 20, so 22. Okay, and one thing that I do want to add for how that makes sense, maybe not the 22 part for the man, but whatever, is I actually saw something not that long ago that mentioned that basically at this time period, and even longer ago, you may see people getting married, primarily talking about women in this case, because of the potential of having children. You could see them getting married earlier, like at a younger age than this, but that they would intentionally not consummate the marriage until around this age or a little later. Specifically because even though there might be the medical capability to have a child, bear a child, and give birth to a child, even back then they were noticing that, it's better if we wait until they're a little bit more physically mature, that there's a greater likelihood of a successful birth, a healthy birth, and also the health of the mother in that situation. So yeah, they would You would see that happen. It would be delayed. In this case, though, it's just, no, you just don't get married until you're 18. It's like, okay, that's not unreasonable. Makes some sense. If any of them run into forbidden embraces before marriage, they are severely punished. The reason for this punishment is wild. I mean, it's like, I understand the idea of, yeah, no, don't be doing that. But still, it's like, this is just silly. I mean, it's kind of one of those, like, with Raphael so much earlier. It's like, I get what you're saying here. I might agree with your end goal, but your logic here, your reasoning is so faulty. I cannot agree with that. Yeah, if they are basically caught fornicating before marriage, they are severely punished. And the privilege of marriage is denied them unless they can obtain a special warrant from the prince. And I just find this so wild, because it's like, why don't we have them get married? I'm like, you just, true, they didn't have them, but it's like, this just sounds like the setup for getting a shotgun. I mean, it's, what? Their reasoning, though, for why. And you need to understand that it's like part of the faultiness to me for this is the fact that this is in their law, okay? This isn't just this is what the culture does. What the culture does would be, getting the shotgun. But no, this is in the law. Yeah. They think that if they were not strictly restrained from all vagrant appetites, very few would engage in a state in which they venture the quiet of their whole lives by being confined to one person and are obliged to endure all the inconveniences with which it is accompanied. So literally, like that is what's written here. They think that if you don't severely punish the people that choose to have sex before getting married, that means then that when they do get married, that, well, if they were to get married afterwards, that, well, they're going to be so tempted to just have sex with so many other people that, because, it's such an inconvenience to be married to one person. It's like, what the hell? This is horrible. It's denigrating to marriage. It's just like, it's also denigrating to these people. This, oh my God. There are people that they do settle down, right? That is a real thing. You can still disagree that they weren't settled down to begin with, the whole sowing wild oats. You can disagree with that, but it's like, in the law that, guess what? You now can't get married. Which, when you also think about it, it's like, okay. What? So is that a reason for them to stop? That's why it's like, okay, we're gonna force you to get married. Then kind of makes more sense. Because at least in that it is okay, and they do have laws concerning adultery, so it's like, okay, then those kick in, and those actually we do get clear punishments from. But it's like it's just so stupid, and it's the whole that basically, if you know that having sex with multiple people is enjoyable, that then when you are married to one, well, we can't have that because you just get, that's not a good thing because you'll just keep wanting to have sex with multiple people. It's like, what are you doing here? It is so silly, so stupid. Also, okay. Let's be clear on this. Even though it describes that this is how they choose their wives and husbands, even though it's presented as that, it is untrue. Because this doesn't explain how the selection is made, but what happens prior to them getting married. So it is quite different. Before marriage, some grave matron presents the bride naked, whether she is a virgin or a widow, to the bridegroom, and after that some grave man presents the bridegroom naked to the bride. So I guess it means that they're not both naked at the same time, but it still is just, what? It also is kind of funny with the whole, wait, they're not allowed to have these forbidden embraces, but we're still going to have them strip naked and be shown off to each other beforehand. Okay. Um, the reason for this, if they are but to buy a horse of a small value, are so, well, that basically in other nations, if somebody is to buy a horse of so small value, are so cautious that they will see every part of him and take off both his saddle and all his tackle, that there may be no secret also hid under any of them, and that yet in the choice of a wife, on which depends the happiness or unhappiness of the rest of his life, a man should venture upon trust. Just gonna expand this note a little bit. There we go. Come on. Sometimes the note-taking aspects of the Kobo are, because it's like once you put it down, if it's already there, just expanding it with this is not always the easiest. But I get the idea here, but this is still stupid. Because it's like, oh yeah, we've got these great hospitals outside, where there'd be nurses and doctors. So instead of it being a, hey doc, have a look, I need to know if she's healthy, and also, hey doc, I need to know if he's healthy. Instead of that, it's a nope. Come on, turn around. I gotta see. Gotta be able to visually inspect. I'm assuming you're not handling, which you would be doing with a horse, by the way. Like you would be touching the horse all over to figure out. It just, there are other ways, and it's also I do wonder how often does this actually come up. Um, I get it's 1516 that this came out, but it's still how common are these diseases that you would see and it would actually trouble you? That wouldn't just be a, oh yeah, I know that I've seen that before. It clears up. I mean, how much of it is that? I just, I don't know what the satire is meant to be here. I really don't. Um, maybe it is just trying, because it does continue about venture upon trust, and only see about a hand's breadth of the face, all the rest of the body being covered, under which may lie some may be contagious as well as loathsome. So it's like, I mean, maybe it's supposed to be a mocking of trying to do so much to hide a person's naked form, naked body. I guess maybe, but why? I don't. That almost seems more a. Why are you even saying that they bother with much clothing? I mean, it's like they go out and work, right? And they wear the leather and skins while they're working, and then they put on the fabric clothing over top when they're around. It's like, why not just have it be that sometimes when they work, they do so in the nude? Because then you're still challenging that kind of idea, and it's also you might in those places be exposed then to a potential spouse, such that then they can still gain that same knowledge, but it isn't done in this odd ritual. I don't know. I really don't get it. I don't know where this is coming from. It's here, and it still is just like a what? Because again, it's like you got doctors here. That's already been explained. You can just do that. And it's also the whole, there is more to the person than just their body. I get it's important, but so's a lot of other stuff. And there's even some mild acknowledgement of that as well. Yeah, and also the whole that, maybe only discover an issue when it's too late to part with her. It's mainly written from the point of view of the man taking a wife. If such a thing discovered after marriage, a man has no remedy but patience. They therefore make it think it is reasonable there should be good provision made against such mischievous frauds. But as I said, you can hide that by, well, you can solve that by having a third party, such as a doctor, do that similar kind of inspection. And then we also continuing on, we get this, which soon does not... It is soon contradicted. Or at least is soon made inconsistent. They are the only people of those parts that neither allow of polygamy. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, polygamy, that's not a good thing. Nor of divorces. It's like, okay, I can also see that being a good thing. Except in the case of adultery. Okay, yeah, I can understand that. Or insufferable perverseness. It's like, oh, okay. That's written here. Say, I can understand this. But then it goes a bit further. And, yeah. And it's also, don't forget, just the whole, they don't allow divorces, except they actually do, which is what I'm going to get to. It's even outside of adultery and this insufferable perverseness. I'm sorry, it's just kind of silly to put it that way. It's like, I guess, no, it's not silly, but it still is just the idea of, wait, he makes you do what? And that is reason which, oh man, that's true. So I'm just also remembering another piece of history that, something that had been done for a while. In fact, Leonardo da Vinci is somebody that was accused of this, and to that end, it does make some believe that he may have been homosexual. It's unclear, though, because sometimes you would have somebody try to accuse somebody of sodomy, which would be considered this insufferable perverseness. But you would do that because it would be against the law, so it would provoke some sort of punishment against whoever you're saying about that person, whoever that person is that you're naming. But here's the problem. There's no way to ever prove it. That was a known issue, or at least is a recognized issue today, such that when, yes, Leonardo da Vinci was accused of sodomy at least once, but he was a powerful person, so people would make such fraudulent, would make accusations in order to just drive him out of courts, and it happened. He would have to go to a different place. So in theory, it's that, but that's what they're referring to here. But again, there's no way to prove this. So it kind of makes like, oh yeah, divorce isn't legal except in this circumstance, which can literally be anything. I mean, it's again, you have to get the Senate to dissolve the marriage. In the case of adultery, it's like, okay, divorced. The injured party, so the one who wasn't cheating, is allowed to remarry. The other is not. We'll get into more of that punishment later. But I also want to mention this. Remember, they say no divorce, except in these two circumstances. But it frequently falls out that when a married couple do not well agree, by mutual consent separate and find out other persons with whom they hope they may live more happily, that this is not done without obtaining leave of the Senate, which neither admits of a divorce, but upon a strict inquiry made, both by senators and their wives, into the grounds upon which it is desired, and even when they are satisfied concerning the reasons of it, they go on but slowly, for they imagine that too great eagerness in granting leave for new marriages would very much shake the kindness of married people. So in other words, divorce is still possible, if it's just you don't get along, and you found somebody with whom you do get along. It's still possible. It's just difficult. You have to go through some hoops. And I do kind of understand and agree with this idea that, hey, we don't want divorce to be easy because you don't want married people to think that, oh, it's easy to get out of this. No, you do want to encourage and support the commitment. Which is also why I would say that, yeah, it's also, you need to make sure that you understand that going into the marriage. It's one of those things, should not be done frequently and often kind of thing. It should be entered into with great understanding of what the expectations and responsibilities are of a marriage, and therefore also with great sincerity and honesty. So, but that's all we got here is, well, I know she doesn't have any ulcers she could hide otherwise. That's really all we got. But there's nothing as far as like how, there's no explanation at any point for how the man chooses the woman. Like how, if it might be the family is choosing it, which to be honest, that is what legitimately expect with Utopia here. As I've said multiple times, it's a slave state. So you would be having spouses potentially selected to the purposes that benefit slaves. So, strong man with a strong woman, right? Or maybe it's a weaker man but an intellectual man with a strong woman, or vice versa. You can do things like that. Or how you want to join together families, how you want to build up new relations. Even though the wife comes to the husband's home, it still is you may want to form a stronger connection there. I mean, and also, why wouldn't the state be involved? I mean, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the state is involved with them having kids. So yeah, now if there's adultery, the adulterer and the adulteress are condemned to slavery. Yet if either of the injured persons cannot shake off the love of the married person, they may live with them still in that state, but they must follow them to that labor to which the slaves are condemned. Which, it does also mention that it is possible that if the adulterer or adulteress is repentant, it is possible for the prince of the state to lift their sentence. But if they relapse, then they're going to be punished to death, be executed, punished with death, I should say. But still, it is this kind of weird thing. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's like, yes, I know she cheated on me, but I still really love her. That means you're going to be working as a slave now. I'm not sure I love you that much. I mean, it is weird. I don't know why. Why it would be this way. I get the idea of punishing adulterers. I really do. I do understand that here. This just seems a weird punishment and weird additional condition to it as well. That if their spouse is willing to forgive them and continue to love them, that it has to, then this happens. But then you also become a slave. It's like, what? I get it's like, but that proves their love for each other. It's like, well, the one did betray the other. I mean, don't want to neglect that, but still is so the innocent is condemned to the same punishment, and this is part of their law. That's a problem. Then we get this. At this point, we really start talking more about the law and also their international affairs. Their law does not determine the punishment for other crimes, but that is left to the Senate. This is such a scary red flag. And it is very much you would not want to live here kind of thing. Because essentially, punishment is tyrannical, okay? Because it is never going to be, except in the case of adultery, rule of law, because there is no law. There is no law defining what the punishment should be. It is purely at the discretion of man. Tyranny, I think Merriam-Webster, it's the third definition, but it is rule by man instead of rule by law. So it is they can just make it up. Whatever it is, we can just decide, yeah, let's make him a slave. Because, the state needs more slaves, right? The state wants more labor being done. So yeah, slave. What did you do, by the way? It's like, I stole a piece of candy. Thought we didn't have theft here. Well, it doesn't matter. Slave. I mean, it's like... Or it could be you know what? That's okay. That's not that bad a thing you did here. Why do you think that we shouldn't punish them that severely? I don't know, because, I kind of like my cousin. I mean, this is why actually having prescribed punishments in the law can be a good thing, because it helps it be neutral then, because it's not what is the person delivering the punishment believe it is, but it's no, what does the law state, regardless of who the convicted person is, regardless of anything about that person, what does the law say? It's like that is a more neutral way of doing this, a more equal way of doing this, a better way of doing this than no, you can always just make it up as you go along. But yeah, for the most part, slavery is the punishment even of the greatest crimes. For as that is no less terrible to the criminals themselves than death, I'm not so sure about that, so they think that preserving them in a state of servitude is more for the interest of the commonwealth than killing them, since, as their labor is a greater benefit to the public than their death could be. It's straight up, hey, it's a way for them to get more slaves. Which is also, don't forget, slaves are perpetually being worked. Now, it does go on, and some of this I understand and can even agree with in sentiment, but it talks about how basically they don't have many laws and all that, but it still is this means that this slave state that is Utopia can decide to just, oh, these people we're going to accuse of crimes, we're going to find them guilty of crimes, and then we're just going to make them slaves because now we can work them more. Like, instead of it being, oh, you have to work for 6 hours, now it's you have to work for 16. I mean, this is exactly a thing that this system enables, but by having the punishments prescribed in the law, that prevents it. Because now you cannot overpunish somebody because you have an upper limit to what you can do to them already. In theory. Not technically, not all punishments have an upper limit, but you can put that in there. Okay? So you cannot overpunish. Oh, yeah. So there's that. I just want to check. I think I didn't make many notes after that, but many highlights after that, I should say, but I think I did have some notes in here. Okay, no. That's after this. Okay. So then we get this line, which is kind of funny because it's something I saw just recently. This is still how some people think, and is kind of disturbing. As they fright men from committing crimes by punishments, so they invite them to the love of virtue by public honors. Therefore they erect statues to the memories of such worthy men as have deserved well of their country, and set these in their marketplaces, both to perpetuate the remembrance of their actions, and to be an incitement to their posterity to follow their example. And as I said, I just saw something where somebody was... The setup here was a cashier at like a grocery store, and a doctor, that they get paid the same, they live in the same homes, it's like in all ways they are the same, but their work is wildly different. And the presumption is that the doctor is doing more for the people around him, is having a more positive impact than the cashier. I will just criticize this quickly and just point out that doctor, you're not necessarily going to see the doctor every day or every week, but that cashier would be interacting with basically everyone in the community constantly. So it's... yes, the doctor, there's far more involved there. When they are needed, it's for a very significant reason. The cashier, in theory, is more change. I get that. I'm just... It's not the best of comparisons, technically. And not even with going to an inversion. What I described there isn't an inversion like we've seen in Utopia. It's other things. But anyhow. But somebody was saying that, oh yeah, well, the doctor can get like a statue or something made of them, and that makes up for it. It's like a statue. That's what Utopia thinks too. That yeah, we'll just build a statue to you, and that's just compensation for being so great a person compared to Steve over there. It's like, what if I don't care about having a statue of myself? Like, what if I'm not about that kind of ego? What if all I need in life is not a statue for people to look up to me and honor me in that way, but to have a wife that respects and loves me and children that honor me? What if that's it? And then when I die, then I'm gone, and then all they have is the memories of me. But hey, you know what? That's enough. Now, why would I strive for these virtues that would earn me that statue? And also, how can I even believe that I would earn that statue? Because like, oh yes, strive for that virtue. You strive for virtue so you can get a statue. But it's like, okay, do I have a checklist? Like, if I do these things, I get a statue? Well, no. It's we can't do it for everyone. It's like, well, okay, but you want everyone to be virtuous, right? Yeah. Then how is that reward useful? It's like, if 1 out of 100 will get a statue, what's the incentive for the 99? I mean, it's basically, you're talking about, here's this transaction it is by its nature a special transaction, right? That statute, there's going to be fewer statutes than people, so the transaction is going to fail for the majority of people. So then why should the majority of people bother? There's part of the reason why transactional setups like this are a problem. Whereas going back to the doctor or the cashier, doctor, you just pay more, you pay better. So that's where the transaction is then. That the value is proven by being given more of something that is of practical value. Whereas the statue is okay, yeah, sure, but I don't necessarily value that. The money I would value, a better house I would value. Because the money I can spend in ways to enrich my life and enrich the life of my family. The house enriches me and my family directly. I mean, it's like, it's still transactionary, but it is not it ceases to be a special transaction. The statue is a special transaction. Better pay is not a special transaction. It's just a transaction. I probably tried to explain that very badly, but I hope it does make sense. And the key is statute is special versus just common transaction, better pay. Okay, it's like the common transaction means that everyone, if they meet the checklist demands, can receive it. That encourages then everyone to meet the checklist demands and receive it. Versus the special, it's going to be restricted to only a few people, so yeah. And it's also, don't forget, it's going to be people selected by the state. So it's going to serve the state's purpose, right? So it's the virtues that the state wants to see that will see the statue being made. It's not the virtues necessarily that the person valued, okay? So, I mean, I guess going to earlier, what do you do, like, it's considered virtuous if you would accept, well, if you never commit adultery and if you never fornicated, you only had sex within your marriage, and that was it. That's it, and you managed to live through. It's like, okay, are you getting statue because you had a good marriage? No. I mean, that's not what the state is going to do here. So how is that a value? Why bother then? I mean, it's like, yeah, sure, there's a law against it, but, just be secret. Hey, don't forget, men can walk into anyone's home. Oh, God. Now we get into some stuff where the sentiment, at least, I do kind of agree with. Well, hang on, let me add a highlight here. So it starts getting into their law in general, nothing specific. With Utopia being, they try to keep very few laws. They have but few laws, and such is a constitution that they need not many. We'll get to why, and it is itself, again, a very demeaning, degrading reason. Utopia is evil, it is a slave state, and what is described here does support that. But I do agree with this much. They very much condemn other nations whose laws, together with their commentaries on them, swell up to so many volumes. Yeah, because this is a legitimate problem that does exist. Ignorance of law is no excuse for breaking it. That is a valid belief, a valid principle to have. But it does also have one valid flaw to it. And that is when the body of laws, the corpus of laws, is so large that it is unreasonable for the average man to know it, then ignorance of the law does become an excuse, because is it reasonable for somebody to know it all without special training? So, for example, something like the Code of Hammurabi, or I'm pretty sure it's the 12 Tables of Rome. Like the 12 Tables, they were actual tables. They were in the forum of their cities, so that you could go there and the laws were written out, and you would be able to read them there. And that's where this ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's where it comes from, because it was publicly written for all to see. So there was no excuse to be ignorant of them. But when you have just such a massive corpus of laws, suddenly how can you not be ignorant of them without specially studying them? Like that, I do agree with that, because that is very much a thing. And there's another point that they have here that where it's like, on the one hand, yes, I understand what you're going here, that first order kind of thing, but that second and third order, it's, nah, you're actually wrong. We'll get to that. They have no lawyers among them, for they consider them as a sort of people whose profession it is to disguise matters and to wrest the laws, and therefore they think it much better that every man should plead his own case, and trust it to the judge as in other places the client trusts it to a counselor. By this means they both cut off many delays and find out truth more certainly. Do you doubt that? For after the parties have laid open the merits of the cause, without those artifices which our lawyers are apt to suggest. So, it makes you now totally dependent on the judge being honest. So, the judge is not bound. We already know the judge is not bound by laws, because you don't have punishments laid out. You don't have those laid out either, and we also don't know because it's so few laws. And we'll get to what the nature of the laws are in a moment. That's that bottom highlight I just read, the thick one there. So, but it's also, what if somebody is just poor at explaining? Or what if somebody doesn't realize that they should share something that's important? Basically, what if somebody's untrained at legal argument? What do you do? What happens then? Because it is also different, but kind of similar. I've talked many times about how I was chronically unemployed for about a decade. Technically, I did have a seasonal job in the middle of that, but it still is a long time of chronic unemployment. So you could argue then that I am not very good at either interviewing, although I got very few interviews, but applying. Somebody else who might be lesser than me in whatever the job would have been that I was applying for, they might have been less than me there, but if they were better at presenting themselves to HR, they succeeded. Well, this would also hold true in a court of law if we're both arguing. That I might be poor at presenting, they might be better. And also, there's one story I remember hearing about that it's probably actually happened many times, where it was in a divorce court and it's figuring out custody of the children. And the father basically worked out all the numbers and provided spreadsheets essentially to show that it would be better for him to have custody of the children, because basically he has the most time he has to serve them, and I think also part of it was he actually was very present in their lives. He was the one going to the Little League games, doing all that sort of stuff. He was the most involved. And also, he's the one who, by making more money, would be better able to keep them and such. But what did the court decide? You just presented me with cold, hard facts. Well, that means that you are cold and hard. So we obviously cannot allow the children to be with you. We're going to give them to the wife. It's I just gave evidence that she would be bad at this. That it's going to be worse for the children to be with her. And you're using the fact that I'm presenting evidence as reason for them to go to her. It's sorry, the Kobo was sitting here, but that's exactly what Utopia would be doing all the damn time. And I'm also just... There was some other thought that I had concerning the story of that kind of case, which oh, yeah, that's right. One of the things that I do find funny is when they've done research into the outcomes of children in single-parent households, they actually do find that boys and girls, doesn't matter, sons or daughters, they have better outcomes when they're raised by the single father than by a single mother. So it's also one of those things where it's even if it's oh, well, you're really cold, it's well, here's also research saying that if I get custody instead of her, the kids will be better off. Which I do kind of wonder what would happen if somebody pushed on that enough, and if the judge decided against, if they could actually sue, because it's hey, isn't the judge's responsibility in this situation supposed to be for the best, to ensure the best situation for the children? The research says that's what the father gave evidence that it's with him, that it should be him, and you still chose against it. Isn't that you actually being negligent or not negligent, but acting specifically contrary to your own responsibilities. I mean, it is one of those funny things where it's like it's all kinds of screwed up. But fortunately, that's largely divorce court. Well, no, even in criminal court, women get away with a lot. And also, there's I remember hearing one story. I know this is far afield. This was years ago, where they had those forbidden embraces, produced a child. They were never married, but sharing custody of the kid. She framed him for some stuff. And initially, the investigator was full on, oh yeah, he did. But fortunately, the investigator kept looking into things. And also the guy, just randomly that day, she tried to accuse him of stuff during the time that he would have been driving to pick the child up from school. Fortunately, he had gone somewhere else to get some coffee and just happened to use an ATM or something like that. So he had an alibi for not necessarily the exact moment, but it still was one of those. There's no way he could drive there to get the coffee, there to do what she accused him of, and then there to get the kid all in this timeline. He had to have gone this way. That's the most reasonable. And just they kept investigating, basically found that, oh yeah, she made it up. She did, so it was a false police report and all that kind of stuff. It even went so far, and this man was very lucky. He worked at a bank. The bank did not fire him. They actually kept him on. But one thing that also was brought up, and this is something that it is rare, but it is a real thing. You can get a declaration of innocence from a court, at least in some places. So typically in American courts, it's guilty or not guilty. They don't typically make a statement, at least not in normal criminal proceeding, of innocence. It's just, hey, we were able to find you guilty, or we failed to find you guilty. So kind of like how I've got the whole recommended, failed to recommend, and recommend against. It's kind of like that. Declaration of innocence would be that third category. And they actually suggested he get it, and he did. He was able to get that. That basically, hey, we have evidence to prove you did not do this, which would be very useful for him because the bank that he worked for, they kept him on. They didn't believe these charges. Awesome. But let's say he applied for a job somewhere else. And in their background search, they found something about this. He could say, hey, no, here's my document. The court said I did not do this, that this was false. Despite even having that, the woman was never charged. That was part of the story. She did violate the law. That is a criminal thing. That false police report, all that. That's perjury and such. Because some of that would have been legal statements. Like under oath, or at least expected that, hey, you are supposed to be telling the truth. Never charged. Utopia, totally good with that, though. That seems to be what their whole design is. That, yeah, it's just, whatever the judge feels is best, what the state feels is best. You know how I started this video off by saying that I just had a different energy to my mind, and so I was going off on long. It was kind of like this, but for other topics. I think I'm still going to keep this one though because it's getting long, and I don't feel like spending another hour. There's also the idea of cutting off many delays. It's like I'm not certain on that one, and find out truth more certainly. It is also true though that my seeing this as being stupid. I am also very biased by the American justice system, which is very different than what would have been here, okay? So, for example, the whole innocent until proven guilty, that's not necessarily a thing back then. The right to counsel, but also the concept of rights. Because, this is one thing that some people don't realize. Because some people think that, oh, yeah, you hire a defense attorney to get so that you can get away with it, and they know this. No. Many defense attorneys will actually say, don't ever tell me if you did or not. Don't know, don't care. That's not because legitimately, that's not even their responsibility. Okay, their responsibility is to make sure that your rights under the law are respected in the court. That's it. Okay? So that's even they don't need to, during a court case, even say a damn thing. They don't have to. Because it's the burden of proof is solely on the prosecution here. That's not always the case, though, at the time period of Utopia. Okay? At that time period, that's not necessarily the case. So, it is very different. But yeah, it is technically here, the responsibility of a defense lawyer is just to ensure your rights are protected. So that's the whole, I object, hey, what he's saying is going to prejudice the jury or something like that. He needs to not say it that way, or the prosecutor is doing this or doing that. It's all about challenging whether or not the prosecution is doing things properly and is properly interpreting evidence. But it is not about getting them off. It's hey, I'm challenging that, and you are successful enough in the challenges that, hey, we can't prove you guilty. That's what not guilty exists for. So, yeah, it's... There are also going to be some people, I'm trying to describe what the system is at least meant to be like. There are going to be some people that, yes, will just try to get you off and try to do whatever. It's like, basically, shyster lawyers. Yes, those do exist. But that's not necessarily what the system is supposed to be like. Anyway, and also, without those artifices, which lawyers are apt to suggest. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that is very much to me so you mean without a lawyer bringing up that, hey, doesn't he have this right to do this thing? Isn't this how that, it's like, asking a question might be oh, yeah, you're right. Case dismissed. I mean, yeah, it's just, I see this as just deeply naive, such that all it would take is the state deciding, we just want more slaves, find more people guilty, and there's no protection against that. Because just, we can trust everyone to be doing their best. And also that we can trust everyone to understand their laws well, because that is also part of it, and what I'm going to get to shortly. But even this next highlight they have for you here is very much open for abuse. All laws are promulgated for this end, that every man may know his duty. Slave state. And therefore, the plainest and most obvious sense of the words is that which ought to be put upon them, since a more refined exposition cannot be easily comprehended. So, that means that, yes, it's the plainest interpretation. Who's deciding what's plain? The state does. Or at least presumably it would be the state. Okay, if the state is the one deciding that, then they can decide that, no, that's not the plain meaning. This is the plain meaning. You're guilty. Because those commentaries that filled those volumes, the refined exposition can bring clarity. So now, the interpretation is being confined to a specific thing. And I'll give an example that I'm not actually sure if it is accurate, but it makes the most sense, actually. And I can believe there's some people, nobody watches these, but I can believe there's some people that aren't going to like this. We'll say I'm wrong, and maybe I am, but I'm still going to present this, because if nothing else, it's an interesting idea to consider. Freedom of the press, I think, is inappropriately understood today. That people today interpret the press as a position, as a job, right? As an occupation. I don't think that's what is actually meant in the First Amendment. I think freedom of the press was more so freedom of the printing press, meaning that the state cannot limit your ability to use or access a printing press. I mean, technically there are some things that, you're not allowed to do that, but it's like you're not allowed to commit certain criminal acts. It is one of those funny things that, yes, we have the Bill of Rights, these inalienable rights, except we do have laws that do say, there are certain criminal things you can do. It's kind of funny, that interplay, but still. I do think that a better, more accurate interpretation is that the freedom of the press is referring to the technology of publication and dissemination. It is not about a job. Because why would that be the only job? And people points out, it's the only occupation mentioned in the Constitution that isn't a government occupation. It's like, maybe it's because it's not mentioned that that's not what they meant. And I could believe, I'm not sure, but I'll bet if I tried looking it up, I'd find it. That you may have had to get like a tax stamp or just some sort of approval by the ruler that yes, you can have a print shop, and then also that it decides what you are and are not allowed to print. So freedom of the press would have been a major thing. Yeah, because I think that makes more sense. Because it's also otherwise, And I can believe that they would have had it at the time, though not as much, but think about today. Am I considered a member of the press? I mean, technically I do write news somewhere, but still, let's set that aside. With what I'm doing right now, am I considered a member of the press? I don't know. I was like, in theory, I could talk about news. I could. I choose not to. That's not the point of this channel. But let's say I wanted to. Let's say I did that. Would that then qualify me as press? And so now I have these special protections. I don't know. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. Who decides that? If it's the government deciding it, then guess what? It's not a right. It's a privilege. Because the government decides, oh, you're not the press, so now you don't have any of those rights. Even if you were acting under good faith, believing that you were a member of the press, and therefore entitled to those rights. See how it now becomes a privilege? That's probably the reason why I think, no, it's actually the technology of the press, the printing press, which, yes, should be extrapolated out to other forms of publication and dissemination. Right? That would be completely appropriate to do, but the idea that it's a specific occupation, no, because then it's the government gets to decide who is and is not an example of it, and it becomes a privilege. So, yeah. And that's exactly what can happen here. Where, to me, the most obvious, I would consider that most obvious, mainly because of that argument that I gave there, that if the government gets to decide who does and does not count, that makes it a privilege. It ceases to be a right. To me, that's obvious, but it is a second-order kind of thought. Okay? It's like, what is the consequence of, who is and is not the press? Because otherwise, it's just, well, everyone, because you should either, to make sure it is a right and not a privilege, then everyone has that. In which case, then why do you have to state it anyway? It would fall under this just freedom of speech then, wouldn't it? Why do you need to single it out? The technology, however, can be singled out versus just speech. So, anyway. So this, as I already said, they get to decide what plane is, so it's their interpretation, not yours. This is the state's interpretation, it's not yours. The state is empowered over you. So yeah, we had that. Then we get a fair amount of, it's also kind of funny, but this is shaken off of the yoke of tyranny. Utopia is itself a tyranny because they can, if they change the interpretations to suit their ends, that's rule of man, not rule of law. Gets into a bunch of stuff concerning international affairs, and I really only have one highlight here. The Utopians call those nations that come and ask magistrates from them neighbors. So basically, a neighboring nation can be like, hey, can we have a magistrate come over here and lead us? And in that case, then, okay, you're a neighbor. But those to whom they've been more particular service, friends. Okay? And then it talks about how, yeah, Utopia doesn't have alliances because no one really keeps treaties, essentially. And it's like, yeah, that can definitely be a thing. Where people only keep a treaty, a contract, as long as it favors them. Which, actually, as I say that now, I remember that Utopia was saying like, oh yes, we all see these things as being so important, and so obviously we will all follow them. By the way, we don't expect that anyone else will outside of Utopia. It's like, this is stupid, because obviously you're recognizing this is something that men do, but no, not Utopians, so that naivete. But it's also, I just find this funny, this idea that, oh yeah, we'll just, bring in, that, well, we will send out magistrates because we're just so great, we're so wonderful that we're going to have nations around us wanting our leadership to come in and lead them. It's like, so they become satellite nations then. Which it is also funny because when I was talking earlier about the statues and that one story that I heard, that was, I'm pretty sure, in relation to the Soviet Union. And it is kind of funny that, I mean, yeah, granted, my knowledge of the Soviet Union, very limited. But it still is a, damn, if it's not following a lot of the stuff in this book. Yeah. Because as far as they had the satellite nations where, yes, they were independent nations, but the government was completely servile to the Soviet Union. And I think in some cases they were putting their people in place. They were putting the magistrates in place. Yeah, in more particular service, friends. So kind of soft conquering, more likely. And then, yeah, it talks about the whole, that, if the common ties of humanity are not enough to knit men together, then why would any kind of league, any kind of treaty? And I mean, I get that, and I do somewhat agree, especially in the case of international dealings, that unless you are going to enforce the treaty, it is meaningless. So I actually do intend for one story. It'll be a while before I get to it. That has something like that as far as like an international body. It is not a governing body. It is intentionally not that. It is more just a place for them to negotiate, such that then they will, if they, instead of trying to come up with an international law to be applied to all of them, no, they basically agree that yes, we will enact this law locally. But technically, the wording of the law can vary from one place to another, because they're trying to enact it locally. Because it means then that the people themselves want to maintain that instead of it just being the international politicians deciding to apply it to people. So, like, I get that, I understand that, but it's still Utopia is stupid. Because then this is also what if you just got a League of Nations around it that were like, we don't like them. They're assholes. And they're stupid. Like, they're really naive. Why don't we just, join together, wipe them out, and take over the island then? Why don't we do that? It's like, they got all this gold and silver. Why don't we just do that? Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, they won't form alliances. They won't form allegiances like this. But they will hire mercenaries to fight for them, trusting the mercenary. It is a level of inconsistency and incoherence that is pretty impressive for its stupidity. All right. And I do find it a little funny because mentioning with the war stuff that of the military discipline is next. That's not the one I wanted to hit. All right. So of the military discipline starts on page 98. I want to see how long it is. Okay, 10 pages for that one. All right. So I can do that tomorrow. Okay. Maybe it won't be as long as this one, because this one I think was also about 10 pages, but gone for an hour. I don't know, we'll see. Yeah. It's also, I can't even be like, well, I mean, I don't know how much in the military stuff is going to get me talking. But then it's like, yeah, this was of slaves and marriages, and we got into law. So, yeah. I still wouldn't want to live there. Oh, man. And I'm also just wondering, because it's like the man gets to inspect the woman's body like that before getting married. What if the man is just like serially saying, no, not good enough. No, I'm concerned about that spot. I'm concerned about that spot. I'm concerned about that. And just works through seeing all these women naked. I mean, it's like, how do you protect against that? This is why a third party might be beneficial, because then it's also that third party can say, especially if there's a doctor, can say, hey, yes, she is healthy. There is no concern here. So now that's not an excuse. He has to come up with another excuse and can't just abuse that ritual. So, yeah. Anyway. See you next time.